A knight's armor held more secrets than a castle vault. For centuries, these metal skins were the ultimate puzzle of survival and status, and we are about to decode 35 of their most important designs. You will walk away understanding exactly how medieval minds solved problems of life and death with hammer and anvil. Why did some helmets become sacred objects buried far from any battlefield? And what hidden purpose lay behind a simple shoulder plate? Each piece of harness tells a story that challenges everything we think we know about the Middle Ages. Are you ready to see past the steel and uncover the real people who wore it? The Spangenhelm's framework of iron strips is a story told in rivets and steel. Picture a helmet not carved from a single piece of metal, but built like a skeletal dome. 4 to 6 spangen, the metal strips, arched from the brow to the crown, creating a sturdy frame. Triangular plates were then riveted between these ribs, forming a protective shell that was far stronger than it appeared. This was not the work of a lone blacksmith, but a brilliant engineering solution. The segmented design could absorb a brutal impact, distributing the force along the framework instead of shattering like a single piece of metal might. It was a puzzle of protection, each piece supporting the others. What is truly compelling, however, is the Spangenhelm's journey. This very same helmet design has been found in the graves of Scandinavian chieftains, buried with Byzantine emperors, and worn by Frankish cavalry. How did one basic pattern conquer so much of the medieval world? The answer lies in its elegant simplicity and adaptability. Any competent armorer could produce it, and its reliable protection made it a constant companion for warriors from the frozen north to the sun-baked shores of the Mediterranean. Yet for all its geographic reach, the Spangenhelm often presents a quiet, unadorned face to history. Most surviving examples are starkly functional, lacking the elaborate inlays or gold leaf we might associate with a warrior of high status. This leads us to a deeper question about the early medieval world. Was a warrior's standing defined by the artistry of his helmet, or purely by its grim utility on the battlefield? The Spangenhelm's silent, practical form suggests that in an era of constant movement and conflict, survival itself was the ultimate mark of honor. This practical design, however, hides a startling secret. Many Spangenhelms were never meant to see a battlefield again. Archaeologists have pulled them from deep peat bogs, lifted them from lake beds, and found them carefully placed in graves, often far from any known conflict. But the real mystery is their condition. Some of these helmets were not merely discarded, they were ritually killed. A sharp, deliberate blow might be struck to the brow, or a section of the framework might be bent and broken. This was not damage from combat, it was a purposeful act. Why would a warrior destroy his own protection? The answer points to a world where objects were believed to possess a spirit or a power of their own. A helmet that had safeguarded its wearer through countless fights was not just metal. It was a companion with its own life force. To simply bury it intact could be dangerous, its power left to wander or fall into the wrong hands. By ritually killing it, its owner released its spirit, offering it back to the gods or the earth in a final, sacred act. This practice blurs the line between pagan tradition and early Christian belief. In one Scandinavian bog, a Spangenhelm was found alongside shattered swords and spearheads, a clear votive offering to a war god. Yet in a Frankish cemetery, a similarly damaged helmet was buried near a small cross, suggesting a fusion of old and new beliefs. The object itself was so potent, so central to a man's identity, that its final disposal required ceremony, regardless of the specific faith. So the Spangenhelm becomes more than a helmet. It is a key that unlocks a medieval mindset where the boundary between the material and the spiritual was paper thin. The very act of crafting such a harness may have been seen as imbuing it with a soul. This transforms our understanding of the early medieval warrior. He was not just a man in a metal shell, but a person in a sacred partnership with his gear, responsible for its creation, its use, and ultimately, its respectful end. The Coppergate helmet was not ritually killed, but carefully hidden. Found deep beneath the streets of modern York, this Anglo-Saxon masterpiece from the 8th century lay preserved in the wet, peaty earth, waiting for centuries. It is a puzzle box forged in iron and brass, and its very existence defies everything we know about its time. While the Spangenhelm was a design shared across continents, the Coppergate is utterly unique. Nothing else like it has ever been found. Its construction is a marvel, a single iron skull crowned with brass strips and intricate press-bletch panels. These panels are not mere decoration, they are a storybook in metal. Thin sheets of foil were pressed over a carved die to raise complex scenes, a technique demanding a master's skill. But the story they tell is a riddle that has divided scholars for decades. One prominent scene on the crest shows a warrior, spear in hand, standing triumphantly over a strange, serpentine beast. Does this depict a hero from a forgotten pagan saga, a tale of Sigurd or Welland the Smith, or is it a scene from Christian scripture, perhaps David defeating Goliath, or even Christ triumphing over the serpent of evil? The answer is lost to us, and this ambiguity is the core of the mystery. In 8th century Britain, pagan traditions and the new Christian faith were locked in a slow, cultural dance. This helmet could have been a powerful statement for a king or a warlord navigating both worlds, its imagery speaking a language that all his followers could understand, regardless of their faith. The sheer quality and cost of its materials point to an owner of immense power and wealth. This was not the gear of a common warrior, but the battle wear of a ruler, a Then who commanded armies. Which makes its final fate all the more baffling. Why was such a priceless object, an item that represented a king's authority and divine right to rule, seemingly abandoned and left in the mud? It was not damaged in battle, nor was it placed in a grave as a grave good. Its hiding place suggests it was concealed, perhaps in a moment of dire emergency, by an owner who fully intended to return for it. Did he fall in a forgotten skirmish on the streets of York? Was he forced to flee and never able to recover his most precious possession? The Coppergate Helmet remains silent on these questions, a solitary king without a name, its brilliant craftsmanship a testament to a single individual's power, and its loss a ghost story from the dawn of England. From the solitary splendor of a king's lost helmet, we step onto a battlefield where uniformity was the new mark of status. The Norman nasal helmet presents a mystery of its own, a puzzle of mass identity forged in steel. Its design is brutally simple, a conical iron cap with a single, defiant strip of metal descending to protect the nose. For over 200 years, this was the face of the knight across Europe. How could something so basic withstand the crushing impact of a lance or the piercing shot of an arrow? The secret is not in complexity, but in clever geometry. That steep, sloping cone was a masterclass in deflection. A sword blow or an arrowhead striking its surface was far more likely to skid harmlessly away than to land a direct, penetrating hit. The nasal guard itself, while leaving the face exposed, protected the most vulnerable center line of the head, deflecting attacks away from the eyes and the bridge of the nose. It was a helmet built for the reality of mounted combat, offering excellent visibility and breathability while turning the wearer's head into a moving, deflective target. The true scale of its use is immortalized in the Bayeux Tapestry, where a sea of nearly identical conical helmets tells a story far beyond fashion. This visual record hints at a medieval logistical feat. Were these helmets produced in small, scattered forges, or did the Normans pioneer a form of early mass production to equip their invading armies? The consistency in their appearance suggests a remarkable level of standardization for the era, a system where armorers worked to a common template to outfit an entire class of warriors. This leads to the helmet's deepest secret, its social power. When every knight wore essentially the same harness, the helmet ceased to be a piece of equipment and became a symbol. It was a visual code, instantly recognizable in art and on the battlefield, that declared, "I am a knight." In a world of rigid social hierarchies, this ubiquitous design was a uniform of belonging. It did not signal individual wealth or artistry like the Coppergate helmet, but rather membership in a powerful, collective brotherhood. The nasal helmet was the great equalizer, a metal badge that forged 1,000 individual fighters into a single, dominant military class. Its long reign proves that sometimes the most powerful statement is not being unique, but being part of the whole. But that collective identity forged by the nasal helmet was about to be encased in steel and sealed off from the world. The Great Helm presents one of the most intimidating silhouettes in all of military history, a stark metal box that completely enclosed the knight's head. Its adoption during the Crusades answered a desperate need for total protection against a storm of arrows and slashing swords. Yet this very solution created a new set of life-threatening puzzles. How did a knight trapped inside this metal coffin actually function? Vision was reduced to a narrow, dagger-like slit, creating a view of the world that was more a flickering film strip than a full panorama. Breathing was a labored effort in a stifling, echoing chamber, and hearing the shouted commands of a battle commander was nearly impossible over the din of combat and the sound of one's own ragged breath. This was the great trade-off, absolute safety at the cost of nearly all sensory input. The evolution of its form is a direct response to this brutal reality. The earliest great helms featured a flat top, a design flaw that turned the crown of the head into a perfect anvil for enemy weapons. The solution emerged in the now iconic Sugarloaf helm, with its gracefully curved skull. This rounded surface was a masterstroke of deflection, causing crushing blows from maces and swords to glance away instead of landing with full, skull-fracturing force. Forensic evidence etched into surviving helms tells a chilling story. We can see the deep, brutal gashes from poleaxes and the star-shaped dents from warhammers, impacts that would have certainly killed a man wearing an open-faced helmet. One particular helm on display in a European museum bears a puncture wound so precise and clean it could only have been made by the tip of a lance during a full-tilt charge, a terrifying testament to the force these boxes were designed to withstand. The Great Helm, therefore, was more than just protective gear. It was a psychological weapon, transforming the knight into an anonymous, unfeeling automaton. On the battlefield, this anonymity was power. Stripped of individual identity, the knight became a symbol of an unstoppable, impersonal force, a metal giant that moved and struck with terrifying purpose. It was the ultimate statement that in the chaos of war, survival could depend on becoming something less, and yet somehow more, than human. That transformation from an anonymous metal box to a new kind of fear began with the bassinet. This was a helmet that hugged the skull, offering far better visibility and mobility than the Great Helm. But its most famous evolution is the one that gave knights a haunting, almost inhuman profile, the visor known as the hounskull. Its name means hound's snout, though soldiers often called it the pig face, and looking at its pronounced, jutting point, you can easily see why. The central mystery of this design is not just what it did, but why it looked the way it did. The obvious answer is defense. That steeply angled snout was a master of deflection. A sword thrust aimed at the center of the face would slide harmlessly to the side, its force dissipated along the smooth, sloping steel. But some historians propose a more subtle, aerodynamic purpose. The pointed shape may have been engineered to destabilize incoming arrows. An arrowhead striking that curved point might not simply bounce off, but be sent into a wild, tumbling spin, robbing it of the focused energy needed to punch through the steel beneath. This was not just a shield. It was a carefully calculated disruption to the physics of missile combat. Yet the true genius of the hounskull lies in its breath. Trapped inside a fully enclosed helmet, a knight's own exhalations could quickly fog the vision slits, turning him blind in the middle of a fight. The solution was a series of intricate holes drilled directly into the snout of the visor. These were not random punctures. They were often arranged in beautiful, geometric patterns, crosses or floral designs that turned a simple functional necessity into a statement of artistry. This network of holes created a constant, swirling draft, pulling fresh air in and pushing stale, moist breath out, keeping the slits clear. It was a perfect marriage of brutal utility and delicate craftsmanship. But we cannot ignore the sheer psychological power of that face. Staring across a battlefield at a line of these pointed, expressionless masks would have been a deeply unsettling experience. It dehumanized the wearer completely, presenting an opponent not as a man, but as a relentless, unfeeling instrument of war. The hounskull was the pinnacle of a design philosophy that understood a fundamental truth, that the most effective armor protects not just the body, but the mind of the wearer, while actively attacking the morale of the enemy. It was a helmet built to win the fight before the first blow was even struck. While the hounskull presented an intimidating face to the world, another form of harness perfected the art of the hidden threat. The brigandine was armor in disguise, a secret woven into the very fabric of a nobleman's clothing. On the outside, it might appear as a fashionable velvet jacket or a simple leather tunic, but inside lay its deadly truth. Hundreds of small, overlapping steel plates, each no larger than a playing card, were meticulously riveted to the fabric backing. The telltale sign was the glint of the rivet heads, often arranged in elegant rows that gave the garment a deceptively decorative quality. This was protection meant to be concealed, a choice that speaks volumes about the perils of daily life for the medieval elite. In an era of courtly intrigue and sudden civil wars, the ability to walk through a crowded hall looking like a courtier while wearing the equivalent of a full torso of armor was a tremendous tactical advantage. It was the perfect defense for an assassination attempt, a quiet rebellion, or simply navigating the treacherous politics of a royal court where a hidden dagger was a constant possibility. Identifying its use in historical records becomes a fascinating forensic puzzle. Chronicles might describe a lord surviving a seemingly fatal stab wound during a feast, the blade miraculously turning on his tunic. Illuminated manuscripts sometimes show figures in civilian dress with strange, patterned lines on their garments, subtle clues left by artists who knew exactly what lay beneath the velvet. The true genius of the brigandine, however, lay in its construction, a process that blurred the line between the blacksmith's forge and the tailor's workshop. Creating one required the hands of a master craftsman, but not just any armorer. This was work for someone who understood drape and movement, who could stitch and rivet the plates in such a way that the wearer could still mount a horse, swing a sword, or even dance without the rigid restriction of solid plate. The armorer became a couturier, tailoring a suit of steel that moved like cloth. This marriage of martial necessity and sartorial elegance created a harness that was as much about social survival as it was about battlefield survival. A silent guardian that proved the most dangerous armor was often the one you never saw coming. While the brigandine protected the torso in secret, a knight's hands were always on display, and their protection became one of the most intricate puzzles a medieval armorer could solve. The articulated gauntlet is a masterpiece of miniature engineering, a symphony of moving steel parts designed for one impossible task: to turn the human hand into a weapon while keeping it perfectly safe. Each finger was encased in a series of individual metal strips called helms, carefully overlapped and joined by tiny rivets acting as pivots. This complex system created a flexible metal skin that moved with the wearer's own joints. But how could a knight possibly grip a heavy sword or feel the delicate tension of his horse's reins through all that steel? The secret was in the glove beneath. A sturdy leather glove served as the foundation, with each helm meticulously riveted directly onto the leather itself. This meant the entire metal shell moved as a second skin, responsive and precise. It was not a rigid cage, but an extension of the hand's own anatomy, allowing for a surprisingly natural range of motion. The true signature of the gauntlet, however, was the gadling. These were the often ornate, sculpted bosses that protected the knuckles. Some were simple rounded domes, while others were fashioned into fierce beasts or floral patterns. This raises a compelling question: were these gadlings purely decorative, or did they serve a darker, more practical purpose? A knight disarmed and grappling in the mud during a melee would have found these reinforced knuckles to be brutally effective. A punch from a gauntlet could easily break bones or shatter teeth, turning a last resort into a decisive blow. They were, in essence, built-in brass knuckles, a hidden weapon in a harness designed for both chivalric display and savage close-quarters combat. This dual nature might explain why so many gauntlets have survived the centuries when other, larger pieces of armor were melted down or lost. Their survival poses a fascinating archaeological riddle. Were these gauntlets considered such personal, highly prized items that they were passed down as heirlooms from father to son, a tangible link to a family's martial legacy? Unlike a breastplate that might be refitted for a new owner, a gauntlet's perfect fit was everything. It was the direct interface between the knight and his world, the tool that held his life in its grasp. This intimate connection may have granted them a sacred status, preserving them long after the battles they were built for faded into history. The human hand, so perfectly protected by the articulated gauntlet, was now part of a complete metal skin that reached its artistic peak in the 15th century. This was the age of Gothic armor, a style born in the workshops of Germany that transformed the knight into a walking cathedral of steel. Its defining feature was a surface alive with intricate fluting, a forest of parallel grooves that covered nearly every plate. The mystery of these grooves is a perfect deception. While they look like delicate decoration, they are a masterclass in structural engineering. Each ridge acts like the corrugated steel in a modern shipping container or the folded paper in a sturdy origami creation, adding immense stiffness and resistance to impact without piling on crippling weight. It was a puzzle of physics solved with hammer and chisel, creating armor that was both remarkably lightweight and incredibly resilient, a combination that modern engineers still study with deep admiration. This fluted shell was almost always paired with a helmet of equally distinctive character, the sallet. With its sleek, rounded skull and a long, sweeping tail that gracefully protected the back of the neck and shoulders, the sallet presented a profile that was both organic and menacing. It looked like the head of a fierce, mythological beast. Some versions included a visor that pivoted up and away, while the German style often featured a heavy, bell-shaped visor with a single narrow eye slit, offering incredible protection at the cost of nearly all peripheral vision. This combination of fluted plate and the sallet's elegant lines creates a compelling question about the knight's very identity in this late medieval period. Was this harness the ultimate tool for the battlefield, a refined instrument of war honed over centuries, or had it transcended its martial purpose to become something else entirely? A high fashion status symbol meant primarily for the glittering theater of the tournament field. The answer is not simple, and that is the point. A German knight clad in full Gothic harness was undoubtedly one of the most protected and mobile warriors on any battlefield. The fluting would have deflected blows with supreme efficiency, and the sallet guarded against attacks from behind in the swirling chaos of a melee. Yet the sheer artistry involved, the countless hours a master armorer spent perfecting those flowing lines, speaks to a powerful social function. This armor was a public declaration of wealth, taste, and technological sophistication. In a tournament, under the gaze of nobles and ladies, a suit of Gothic armor was a wearable fortune, a statement that its owner belonged to the very pinnacle of a changing society. The knight was caught between two worlds, his harness a beautiful, ambiguous artifact that was both a lethal second skin and a glittering badge of honor. While the Gothic style turned knights into walking cathedrals of fluted steel, the Italian masters of Milan pursued a different kind of perfection. Their Milanese armor presented a silhouette of smooth, rounded curves, a flowing organic shell that seemed to reject the very idea of a sharp corner. The mystery of this design lies in a single, brilliant principle: deflection. Every convex surface, from the bulbous breastplate to the gracefully rounded pauldrons protecting the shoulders, was engineered to be a sloping fortress. A lance strike or a sword blow would not meet a flat surface to bite into, but a curve that guided its force harmlessly away, sliding off the knight like water off a stone. This fundamental idea of sloped armor for deflecting projectiles would not be seen again on such a scale until the birth of the modern battle tank, a direct descendant of this medieval insight. But how did Milan become the epicenter of this revolutionary craft? The city's workshops were less like forges and more like intellectual guilds, where master armorers guarded their technical secrets with the ferocity of dragons hoarding gold. Techniques for heat-treating steel to achieve the perfect balance of hardness and flexibility, or patterns for shaping those iconic curves, were passed from father to son, protected by strict apprenticeships and guild laws. The loss of a single master's knowledge could mean the collapse of an entire workshop's reputation. This was not merely about craftsmanship, it was about economic and political power. The wealth flowing through Italian city-states like Milan and Venice fueled a constant demand for the very best protection. Ambitious condottieri, the mercenary generals who commanded private armies, needed to equip their forces to secure lucrative contracts. Rival city-states engaged in an arms race, each seeking an edge through superior harness. The armorers of Milan were not just artisans, They were strategic assets, their hammers and anvils as vital to the state's security as its fortifications and soldiers. This system of mass demand led to one of the harness world's best-kept secrets, the production of munition-grade armor. We often imagine every suit of plate was a custom-fitted masterpiece for a noble lord, but this is only half the story. Milanese workshops also produced standardized, off-the-rack suits for the common infantryman and the mercenary. These were simpler, heavier, and lacked the fine polishing and decoration of a knight's harness, but they offered incredible protection for their cost. How did this work? Armorers created sets based on common sizes, building up stocks of pauldrons, gauntlets, and breastplates that could be mixed and matched to equip a company of soldiers quickly and efficiently. The existence of this munition armor completely upends our image of the medieval army. It reveals a sophisticated military-industrial complex operating centuries before the term was coined, where the protection of the common man became a calculable, mass-produced commodity. The Milanese harness, therefore, presents two faces: the exquisitely tailored defensive sculpture for the elite, and the robust, anonymous shell for the rank and file. Both were born from the same genius for turning curved steel into a matter of life and death. At the very heart of a knight's metal skin lay the cuirass, the breastplate and backplate that guarded his life. This was the shield for his lungs and heart, the piece of armor that had to stand firm against the deadliest threats. But by the 15th century, a new and terrifying sound echoed across European battlefields: the crack of the gunpowder pistol. This new weapon created an arms race that left its permanent mark on the steel itself, in the form of tiny, stamped symbols known as proof marks. To find one of these stamps on an old breastplate is to discover a certificate of survival from a violent test. This was not a maker's mark identifying the workshop. It was a formal declaration that this particular piece of armor had been proven, tested against an actual pistol shot, fired at close range. The armorer and his client needed to be sure their investment would not fail at the crucial moment. Deciphering these marks is a job for medieval detectives. A small stamp of a pistol, a cross, or a stylized letter was not just a brand, it was a legal guarantee. It told a knight that this steel had faced the new reality of warfare and had won. But this practice raises a chilling and practical question. How did an armorer safely conduct such a dangerous test? The answer reveals a blend of brutal pragmatism and clever procedure. They would not risk a finished, beautifully shaped breastplate in the first test. Instead, they likely used a flat sample plate of the exact same steel, taken from the very same batch as the cuirass itself. This test plate would be mounted on a wooden frame or a sandbag, and a pistol would be fired at it from a specified distance. If the ball dented the plate deeply but did not penetrate, the steel was deemed proof. The proof mark was then stamped onto the successful cuirass that came from that batch. This leads to an even darker mystery. What happened to the suits of armor that failed the test? A cuirass that shattered under a pistol ball was worse than useless. It was a death trap. The fate of that failed steel is rarely discussed, but the evidence suggests it was quietly taken out of circulation. It might have been scrapped and melted down, the flawed metal recycled into something less critical. Or more disturbingly, it could have been sold off cheaply to less discerning buyers, perhaps for use in a pageant or a tournament where live gunfire was not a risk. Its fatal flaw hidden under a coat of paint or a layer of cloth. The existence of proof marks, therefore, represents a pivotal moment in history. It is the moment when the medieval armorer formally acknowledged that his ancient craft was now in a direct, explosive conversation with the new science of gunnery. Every stamped pistol on a breastplate is a silent story of that confrontation, a permanent record of a day when a piece of armor faced a shot meant to kill it, and lived to tell the tale. A knight's armor had to solve the most intimate of human problems. Descending from the sturdy cuirass was the fold, a flexible steel skirt made of horizontal lames that protected the hips and abdomen. From this skirt hung the tassets, plates that shielded the vulnerable front of the thighs. At first glance, this assembly looks rigid, a metal cage that would make sitting in a saddle impossible. The solution was a masterpiece of hidden engineering, a system of internal leather straps and cleverly designed sliding rivets. These were not fixed fastenings, but rivets set in long, narrow slots that allowed each plate of the fold and each tasset to shift and pivot independently as the wearer moved. When a knight mounted his horse, the entire assembly could gracefully compress and adjust, the plates riding up just enough to permit a comfortable seated position without exposing the groin or upper legs. It was armor that understood the body it encased, moving in concert with the rider rather than fighting against him. But the fold guarded an even more practical secret, one rarely illustrated in heroic tapestries. Embedded within its lames was often a discreet, specially shaped plate known as a gusset or a biseju, which could be unlatched or swung aside. This was the solution to a fundamental, undeniable need, allowing a knight to relieve himself without the monumental task of disarming. In the midst of a long campaign or a tense siege, this small, ingeniously shaped piece of steel was as vital to a warrior's endurance as the strongest breastplate. Its existence speaks to the total, unflinching practicality of harness design. The armorers who devised these systems thought of everything, from deflecting lance strikes to managing the basic realities of a human body, confined in steel for days on end. This hidden latch transforms our image of the knight from an invincible metal giant into something far more relatable. A person who had to live inside that shell through every moment of a campaign, relying on the quiet genius of its design for dignity as well as defense. Even a knight's feet were sheathed in moving steel. The sabaton was a marvel of miniature engineering, a flexible metal shoe that followed every step its wearer took. Its surface was a mosaic of overlapping lames, tiny steel plates riveted together in a way that allowed the entire foot to bend and flex at the toe. But the real puzzle lies not on a clean castle floor, but on the chaotic ground of a real battlefield. How did this intricate metal skin avoid snagging on every root, catching in every patch of mud, or simply tripping its wearer at a fatal moment? The secret was in the precise curvature and overlap of each plate. The lames were shaped and angled so that their leading edges were lifted slightly, creating a smooth, deflective surface that would slide over obstacles rather than dig into them. It was armor designed for motion, a far cry from the rigid boots we might imagine. Yet in the 15th century, this practical design took a bizarre and dramatic turn. The sabaton evolved into the solret, a foot harness that mimicked the most extreme civilian fashion of the day. These were not just pointed toes. They were impossibly long, slender steel spikes that extended inches beyond the wearer's actual foot. Some surviving examples curl upward in an elegant, almost comical arc. This presents one of the most perplexing riddles in all of harness design. Could a knight possibly have fought effectively while wearing what amounted to metal skis on his feet? The answer forces us to separate the grim reality of war from the glittering theater of peace. On a muddy, corpse-strewn battlefield, such an exaggerated design would have been a death sentence, catching on every fallen shield and tangled banner. But in the controlled environment of a tournament or a peacetime parade, the story was completely different. The extreme solret was a loud, undeniable status symbol. Its impractical length proclaimed that its owner was so wealthy, so secure in his social standing, that he did not need to worry about the messy necessities of actual combat. It was the medieval equivalent of wearing impossibly high-fashion heels, a statement that you existed in a world where function was secondary to form. This dangerous intersection of armor and fashion reveals a profound shift. The harness was no longer just a life-saving tool. It was a walking advertisement of a knight's place in a changing world, a world where the pageantry of power could sometimes outweigh its practical application. Beneath the brilliant shell of polished steel, every knight wore a secret. The gambeson was the true foundation of a warrior's harness, a padded jacket that turned the body itself into a fortified structure. Its mystery does not lie in intricate metalwork, but in the humble, almost forgotten materials stuffed inside its quilted channels. What gave this simple garment the power to absorb the crushing force of a mace blow or the piercing energy of an arrow? The answer was a masterful use of what was available. Layers of old linen or wool cloth, scraps of felt, and even horsehair were densely packed and stitched down, creating a fibrous armor that was deceptively resilient. This was not just padding, it was a shock absorption system. When a blow landed on the plate armor outside, the gambeson beneath compressed, spreading the impact over a wider area and stopping the metal from turning into a bruising or even bone-breaking secondary weapon against the wearer's own body. For a common foot soldier who could never afford a full harness, a thick, well-made gambesson was often his only defense, and it was remarkably effective. Historical accounts describe arrows failing to penetrate a good gambesson, their force spent in the tangled maze of fibers long before reaching the skin. This leads to the garment's greatest archaeological puzzle. If the gambesson was so vital and so common, why do we almost never find a complete, preserved one? The answer is a story of brutal practicality. Unlike a steel breastplate that could be passed down for generations, a gambesson was a consumable item. It was worn in every kind of weather, soaked with sweat and rain, and subjected to constant friction and impact. It was worn until the fabric literally fell apart. And when it could no longer be patched, its materials were not wasted. The cloth could be cut down for other uses, the stuffing reused for a new jacket, or even for bedding. The gambesson lived and died in service, its destruction a testament to its constant, essential use. Its near-total disappearance from the historical record is not a sign of its unimportance, but the ultimate proof of its daily, grinding necessity on the long march and in the heat of the fight. But for all the genius of layered plate, the true heart of medieval protection was a shirt of interlocking rings. The chainmail hauberk is an icon for a reason, a garment of incredible flexibility that could turn a slashing blade with ease. Yet its creation is one of the great logistical puzzles of the Middle Ages. How did an armorer possibly produce the millions of rings needed for a single long shirt? The process began not with rings, but with wire. A blacksmith would draw hot iron through a series of progressively smaller holes in a steel draw plate, creating a long, thin, and surprisingly uniform wire. This wire was then coiled tightly around a metal rod, forming a long spring. The spring was sliced down one side with a chisel, creating a cascade of individual open rings. The true test of patience came next. Each of these rings had to be riveted closed. The armorer would flatten the ends of a ring, drill a tiny hole through them, insert an even tinier rivet, and then hammer it flush. This was the work of countless hours, a monumental effort for a single hauberk. The most common weaving pattern was called 4-in-1, where every single ring linked through 4 others, creating a dense, incredibly strong metal fabric. This method produced a mesh that would distribute the force of a cut across multiple rings, blunting the attack and preventing a deadly penetration. But here we encounter a metallurgical mystery. Some of the finest surviving hauberks show almost no sign of rust, their iron rings still supple after centuries. How was this possible? The secret might lie in the quality of the iron itself, often sourced from specific bogs known for pure ore, and in the fires of the forge. The process of drawing and working the wire could burn away some impurities, and the constant heating and hammering during riveting may have created a kind of rudimentary, accidental steel coating that helped resist corrosion. The popular image of a knight crushed under the weight of his mail is another myth in need of dismantling. A full hauberk weighed between 20 and 30 pounds, but this weight was not carried like a backpack. It was expertly distributed across the shoulders, chest, and hips, hanging like a very heavy, flexible tunic. Modern reenactors who wear accurate reproductions report that after an initial period of adjustment, the mail becomes a second skin, allowing for running, climbing, and mounted combat with a remarkable degree of freedom. Yet this metal skin had a dark and hidden danger known as ring drift. When a powerful thrust from a spear or arrow did manage to pierce the mail, it wouldn't just push the rings aside. The force could shatter them, sending sharp, broken fragments of iron deep into the wound alongside the weapon itself. This created a horrific medical emergency on the battlefield, where a surgeon would have to remove not only the arrowhead, but also the shattered pieces of the warrior's own armor from his flesh. The hauberk was a loyal guardian, but its failure was a uniquely brutal betrayal. A warrior's mail shirt guarded his body, but his head and neck presented a far more complex puzzle to solve. The coif was the answer, a tight-fitting hood of chainmail that protected the skull, cheeks, and the vital column of the throat. Woven from the same thousands of riveted rings as the hauberk, it was a second skin of steel for the head. But its most ingenious feature was the ventail, a clever flap of mail that was an integral part of the coif itself. In times of peace or on a long march, this flap could be left hanging loose on one side of the face, or folded down like a collar. The moment combat loomed, however, the warrior would draw this steel curtain across his mouth, nose, and lower jaw, securing it tightly to the opposite side of the coif with a sturdy lace. This single, simple action transformed his protection, shielding the most vulnerable parts of his face from a slashing blade, while still leaving his vision completely unobstructed. The convenience of this system is what makes it so brilliant. A knight could easily unlace the ventail to eat, drink, or simply breathe more freely during a lull in a siege, without having to remove any other part of his harness. This small detail speaks volumes about the reality of warfare, where moments of rest were as crucial as the fighting itself. Yet this system created a practical problem that has left its mark on historical art and surviving artifacts. How did a warrior keep his heavy mail coif from shifting or sliding off his head during the violent motion of battle? The answer reveals two distinct schools of thought, a choice between integration and independence. Some knights wore their coif as a completely separate piece, its weight borne solely by the shoulders, but a more common and secure method was to attach it directly to the hauberk beneath, often with a series of leather laces or even small metal hooks. This created a unified defensive layer, a continuous shell of mail from the top of the head down to the knees. You can sometimes see the evidence of this in medieval illustrations, where a line of lacing is visible just below the chin, connecting the edge of the coif to the collar of the hauberk. This was not just about comfort, it was about survival. A coif that twisted during a fight could blind a warrior for a fatal second. The secure integration of the coif and its ventail was therefore a matter of life and death, a perfectly solved puzzle in the everyday security of the medieval warrior. It was a reminder that in the chaos of a melee, the smallest detail, a single lace holding a flap of mail in place, could be the only thing standing between a knight and the edge of a sword. A knight's shoulders sometimes carried not just steel, but a canvas. The ailette is one of the most fleeting and perplexing pieces of harness ever devised. Picture a small, square or rectangular plate, often made of leather, wood, or even stiffened parchment, fastened to the shoulder by a cord or lace. For a brief period spanning the 13th and early 14th centuries, these curious plates were the height of knightly fashion, and then they vanished as suddenly as they appeared. Their very existence poses a fascinating riddle. What was their true purpose? On one hand, their placement on the shoulder suggests a defensive role. They could have been designed to protect the side of the neck from a downward sword slash, a vulnerable area where the helmet and body armor met. Yet their construction from such flimsy, perishable materials argues powerfully against this idea. A thin piece of wood or parchment would offer little real protection against a battle axe. This leads to the more compelling theory that the ailette was primarily a heraldic billboard. In the swirling chaos of a melee, with faces hidden by great helms, identifying a specific knight was nearly impossible. The ailette, standing upright on the shoulder, presented a perfect, highly visible surface for displaying a knight's coat of arms. It was a mobile, personal standard, a way to announce one's identity and lineage to allies and enemies alike. The evidence for this is etched into the stone of countless church effigies and painted in the vivid colors of illuminated manuscripts, where knights are shown with these distinctive shoulder plates emblazoned with heraldic beasts and geometric patterns. But this theory only deepens the central mystery of their disappearance. If they were so useful for identification, why were they abandoned so completely? The answer likely lies in the relentless evolution of shoulder armor itself. The development of the more robust, articulated steel pauldron offered genuine, all-around protection for the shoulder and upper arm. The pauldron was a solid, integrated piece of the harness, not a fragile add-on. It rendered the delicate ailette obsolete overnight, a fashionable experiment that was sacrificed to the unforgiving demands of battlefield survival. The ailette's brief reign is a powerful reminder that in the medieval arms race, not every innovation was about pure defense. Some were fleeting statements of identity, ghostly silhouettes that whispered a knight's name before they were silenced by the relentless march of better steel. Step onto the tournament field, where the art of defense was reimagined for a single, thunderous moment of impact. The jousting garniture was not one suit, but a modular system, a knight's personal toolkit for the perilous theater of the tournament. Its central mystery lies in its obsessive specialization. Why would a knight, who already owned a magnificent field harness for war, need an entirely separate, heavier, and asymmetrical set of armor just for the joust? The answer is brutally simple. War was chaotic and unpredictable, but the joust was a controlled event with one known, terrifying variable: the full force of a heavy lance striking the chest at a combined speed that could shatter bone and steel. Standard battlefield armor was simply not enough. The garniture was a direct response to this singular, violent puzzle. Its components were like specialized keys for different locks. A knight might have a lightweight, flexible set for the melee, but for the joust, he would assemble his heaviest, most rigid pieces. The left side of the body, the side that faced the opponent and took the brunt of the lance strike, was massively reinforced. The pauldron on the left shoulder was often a single, thick piece of steel, sculpted into a graceful but immensely strong shell known as the Grand Guard. A reinforced shield called the Pass Guard was bolted directly to the breastplate, and an extra plate, the Manifer, was strapped over the left gauntlet. This was armor built to be a wall, accepting an impact that would have crumpled a standard harness, but the most bizarre piece of the puzzle was the frog-mouthed helm. Its name comes from its peculiar shape, with a top that jutted out like the face of a frog, featuring a single, narrow vision slit. This design seems dangerously flawed. When the knight sat upright in his saddle, the slit was angled in such a way that he could see almost nothing, staring into the dark interior of his own breastplate. It was only when he leaned forward into the charge, couching his lance, that the vision slit aligned with the world outside, giving him a clear, if narrow, view of his oncoming target. This was not a design flaw, it was the entire point. In that terrifying moment of the charge, the helmet forced the knight into the perfect, stabilized position for an accurate strike. More importantly, it eliminated all distractions. He could not look down or to the sides. He could only focus on the small piece of his opponent directly ahead. And in the inevitable, shattering collision, the frogmouth's unique shape had one final, life-saving feature. Its protruding top was designed to deflect a splintered lance upward and away from the slit, rather than allowing shards to be driven inward toward his face. The jousting garniture reveals a world where chivalric sport was a calculated, high-stakes gamble with death. This was not a game. It was a spectacle of physics and courage, where armor had to solve one very specific, violent equation to keep its wearer alive for the cheering crowds. A knight's shield was far more than a simple slab of wood. It was a dynamic piece of his harness, a mobile fortress wall that evolved to solve the deadliest puzzles of the battlefield. The great kite shield of the Norman knight, tall and teardrop-shaped, was a marvel of defense for a specific kind of warrior, the cavalryman. Its elongated form protected his entire left side from shoulder to ankle while on horseback, a vital defense against infantry attacks aimed at his unarmored legs. But this very strength became a liability as combat changed. When a knight was unhorsed, the long shield became a cumbersome, unwieldy burden in the close press of a melee. The solution that emerged was the heater shield, the iconic triangular shape we most associate with knights. Its smaller, more compact form was a direct response to new realities. As plate armor improved and began covering more of the body, a warrior needed less passive coverage from his shield and more active control. The heater was lighter, easier to pivot and angle, transforming the shield from a static wall into an active, deflective tool. This shift in form reveals a deeper change in the very art of fighting. A knight could now punch with the shield's edge, hook an opponent's weapon arm, and move with a speed that the old kite shield simply did not allow. But the shield's surface held a code as important as its shape. The vibrant heraldic designs painted upon it were not mere decoration. They were a vital visual language for the chaos of war. In a sea of identical great helms and surcoats, a unique coat of arms was the only way to tell friend from foe. A golden lion on a red field or a complex pattern of chevrons and fleur-de-lis was a knight's instant identification, a beacon for his followers and a warning to his enemies. This system turned the shield into a personal banner, a declaration of identity that could be recognized in the dust and confusion of a charge. Yet beneath this colorful surface lay a more brutal secret, the boss. This domed metal circle at the shield's center is often explained as a simple cover for the hand grip, and it did serve that practical purpose, but its shape suggests a more aggressive function. A skilled warrior could present the hard, rounded surface of the boss to meet an incoming sword strike. The curved steel could potentially catch a blade, and with a sharp twist of the shield, the immense force could notch, bend, or even snap the opponent's weapon. This transforms our image of the shield from a purely defensive item into an offensive tool, a metal fist that could disarm a foe as effectively as it could block his blow. The shield's entire evolution, from its sweeping silhouette to the language on its face and the trap at its heart, shows a piece of equipment in constant, intelligent conversation with the violence it was meant to survive. A knight's survival could hinge on the shape of his own knee. The Polin was far more than a simple steel cap. It was a complex anatomical puzzle, solved with hammer and anvil. This piece of harness wrapped the joint in a rounded, sculpted shell that mimicked the body's own form, with a fan-like plate extending downward to shield the shin. But the true mystery of the Polin lies in those distinctive side wings, the flaring plates that projected from either side of the knee. Their most obvious purpose was to guard against a devastating lateral slash, a sword blow aimed at the side of the joint that could sever ligaments and drop a warrior to the ground. Yet a more subtle theory suggests these wings served a dual purpose for the mounted knight. The inward curve of the wing could act as a subtle grip against the horse's flank, providing a small but crucial point of contact that helped stabilize the rider during the violent motion of a charge or a tight turn. This transforms the Polin from a simple shield into an integrated component of the cavalryman's control system. But how did this rigid shell of steel manage the immense shock of an impact without shattering the kneecap it was meant to protect? The secret was hidden from view, a layer of thick padding quilted directly onto a leather lining inside the steel shell. This padding was the true shock absorber, compressing to dissipate the energy of a blow that would otherwise be transmitted directly through the metal into the bone. Without this hidden comfort, the armor itself would become an instrument of torture with every step or fall. This crucial detail is almost never seen in a museum display, where the polished steel exterior is presented in sterile isolation. It forces us to remember that every piece of a knight's harness was a system, a marriage of hard metal and soft, forgiving materials that worked in concert to turn the human body into a fortress. The silent, missing padding inside the Polin is a ghost of the comfort and practical genius that made the whole harness possible. That small, circular plate dangling near the armpit holds a secret of motion. The Bisseju may look like a simple steel disc, but its placement is the key to its entire purpose. It hangs directly in front of the gap beneath the shoulder, one of the most lethal weak points in any suit of plate armor. A knight could raise his arm to strike with a sword, and in that moment, a thin, unguarded line would open between his breastplate and the rerebrace protecting his upper arm. An enemy's blade, whether a spear point or a sword's tip, could slip into that gap and find its way directly into the chest cavity or sever the major arteries running through the armpit. This was a kill shot, and the Bisseju was the elegant, swinging answer. But why was it almost always suspended on a leather strap instead of being bolted rigidly to the pauldron? A fixed plate would have been worse than useless. When the arm was at rest, a rigid Bisseju would jut out awkwardly, and when the arm was raised, it would be pulled up and away, completely exposing the very gap it was meant to protect. The freely hanging design was pure genius. On their leather straps, these circular plates became dynamic defenders. They hung perpendicular to the ground, constantly covering the gap regardless of whether the arm was raised, lowered, or held straight out. When a thrust did come, the Bisseju's smooth, curved surface would guide the weapon's point to slide harmlessly to the side. The plate would swing with the impact, dissipating the energy rather than resisting it head-on. This was not a static shield, but an active, moving parry built directly into the harness. Yet this brilliant solution presents a deep archaeological puzzle. If Bissejus were so vital, why are they relatively rare in museum collections today? They appear constantly in the detailed carvings on knightly effigies and in the vibrant colors of illuminated manuscripts, a clear sign that every well-equipped knight was expected to have them. Their absence from the surviving physical record suggests two intriguing possibilities. Perhaps they were so common, so standard, that they were considered almost disposable, like a replaceable part on a machine. When a suit of armor was passed down or repurposed, these small, lightly attached plates may have been the first pieces lost or discarded, or, more likely, their function was simply absorbed. As armor design grew more sophisticated in the late 15th and 16th centuries, the large, articulated shoulder defenses known as pauldrons began to incorporate their own built-in extensions, curling inward to form a permanent, integrated bascinets. The swinging disc was no longer needed because the entire shoulder assembly had evolved to close the deadly gap itself. The bascinet's story, therefore, is one of a perfect, specialized solution that was ultimately rendered obsolete by the relentless progress of the armorer's art, leaving its ghostly image swinging in stone and paint, a reminder of a vulnerability that once haunted every knight's swing. That final click of a locking pin signaled a revolution in head protection. The armored helmet completely enclosed the knight's skull, but unlike the suffocating great helm, it was engineered to open like a metal flower. Its two hinged cheek plates swung outward, granting the wearer easy access before battle. Once closed around his head, a simple but brilliant mechanism locked everything securely in place. The mystery of this lock is a study in elegant precision. A spring-loaded catch, or sometimes a simple vertical pin, would engage automatically as the cheek plates met at the chin. The wearer would hear a distinct click, a reassuring sound that told him his fortress was sealed. But what happened if that knight was knocked to the ground, dazed and struggling to breathe inside his own helmet? Could he free himself in an emergency? The answer reveals a clever failsafe. The locking pin was often designed to be released with one hand. A knight might only need to tug on a small leather tab attached to the pin, or press a discreet lever located near his chin. This was not a complex puzzle to solve, even for a disoriented mind. It was a life-saving feature built into the very heart of the mechanism. A virtual disassembly of an armet reveals the meticulous engineering behind this system. Each hinge had to be perfectly aligned, each swinging plate balanced so its weight did not strain the pivot points. The lock itself had to be robust enough to withstand a brutal impact, yet delicate enough to disengage with a simple, intentional pull. This was not the work of a common blacksmith, but of a master metalsmith who understood both strength and human frailty. The armet solved the great helm's most dangerous puzzles. It offered near-total cranial protection, but its form-fitting design preserved crucial peripheral vision. Those hinged cheek plates also created narrow gaps that allowed for a constant flow of air, preventing the stifling echo chamber of its predecessor. This helmet represents a technological peak, a moment when medieval armorers achieved a perfect balance between absolute safety and the essential needs of the warrior inside the steel shell. A knight's arm was a weapon in constant motion, and its armor had to move with it. The rerebrace shielded the upper arm, the vambrace encased the forearm, and between them, the cauter protected the elbow like a steel shell. But this was no rigid tube. The true genius lay in the articulation, the way each piece overlapped and pivoted to mimic the bending of the joint without ever exposing a fatal gap. When the arm was straight, the lames of the rerebrace and vambrace slid smoothly over the central cauter, creating a continuous surface. As the arm bent, they shifted and separated, the cauter acting as a fixed pivot point, while the upper and lower plates gracefully retreated into the new angles, always maintaining a defensive overlap. This was armor that understood geometry, a moving fortress for the limb. The cauter itself often flared out into a fan shape, a design that seems purely decorative until you consider the vulnerability it guarded. The inner elbow is a deep pit of tendons and arteries, a target every warrior knew. That flared wing was a deflector, its curved edge designed to catch the tip of a sword or spear and guide it harmlessly outward, away from the soft, unprotected hollow of the joint. It was a subtle but brilliant piece of psychological warfare, telling an opponent that even the most tempting target was a dangerous trap. Yet for all this sophisticated motion, the arm harness had to solve a far more mundane puzzle: how to get it on. The vambrace frequently featured a removable lower section, a cuff that could be detached with a simple pin. This small, practical feature transformed the difficult task of donning the full-arm defense. A knight could strap the main vambrace to his forearm, then easily slide his hand through the open end to put on his articulated gauntlet. Once the gauntlet was securely laced, he would slot the metal cuff back into place and secure the pin, completing the armored sleeve. This was not a compromise in security, but an enhancement of it, ensuring every piece could be fastened perfectly for a seamless fit. The entire assembly, from shoulder to wrist, was a testament to the armorer's obsession with perfect integration, where every swing of a sword or gentle bend of the arm was supported by a silent, intelligent machine of interlocking steel. Long before knights were encased in seamless steel, their predecessors wore a skin of 1,000 metal leaves. This was scale armor, known to the Romans as lorica squamata, a harness that refused to disappear from the battlefields of Europe and the Near East for centuries. Its construction was an exercise in patience, each small metal scale pierced with several holes and meticulously laced to its neighbors on a sturdy backing of leather or padded cloth. The result was a flexible, shimmering defense that moved with the wearer like the skin of a great metal fish. Yet this very flexibility concealed a deadly secret, a weakness that would ultimately seal its fate. While it was superb at deflecting slashing attacks, a well-aimed thrust from below was its nemesis. An opponent could slide a sword point or spear tip upward, catching the lower edge of a scale. Instead of meeting solid resistance, the weapon would push the scale up, forcing its neighbors apart and creating a momentary but fatal gap that led directly to the flesh beneath. It was a vulnerability that mail, with its interlocked rings and eventually solid plate, simply did not possess in the same way. So why did this flawed design persist for so long alongside more advanced protection? The answer lies in its accessibility. For a lord outfitting a large garrison, scale armor was often cheaper and faster to produce than the labor-intensive chainmail hauberk. Any competent armorer could punch out scales and have his apprentices lace them, a form of early mass production that made decent protection available to many. But the true mystery of scale armor is written in its geography. How did nearly identical designs appear in the graves of Scandinavian merchants, the arsenals of Byzantine frontier guards, and the battlefields of the Crusader states? Was this a case of Roman technology slowly diffusing outward through trade and conquest, a ghost of the legions haunting a new age? Or did armorers in different lands, faced with the same fundamental problem of how to cover a man in metal, arrive at the same elegant, yet flawed, solution entirely on their own? Each discovered sherd of scales is a clue in this ancient puzzle, a testament to an idea so simple and compelling that it crossed continents and cultures, only to be slowly abandoned when the unforgiving science of the battlefield demanded something better. That integrated neck defense on the great bassinet was a direct answer to a terrifying new sound, the thrum of a steel crossbow bolt. While the earlier bassinet relied on a separate mail collar called a standard, this new design forged the helmet and the neck into a single, unbroken shell of steel. The mystery is not just the rigid construction, but the sudden urgency behind it. Why abandon the flexible, centuries-old protection of mail for a solid plate gorget? The answer is written in the physics of new weapons. A heavy lance strike in a tournament charge or a crossbow bolt at close range carried enough force to crush the iron rings of a mail standard, driving them into the throat or snapping the neck vertebrae beneath. The rigid, sloping plates of the great bassinet's integrated defense were engineered to do one thing: to glance that immense force away, redirecting it around the body rather than letting it be absorbed by the spine. This was a fundamental shift from flexible absorption to rigid deflection, a change dictated by the escalating power of projectile warfare. But this brilliant solution created an immediate and painful new problem. The entire weight of the helmet, now significantly heavier with its attached steel collar, could no longer rest on the wearer's head. To have that mass supported by the skull and neck would be exhausting and dangerous, leading to whiplash injuries from any impact. The challenge was how to transfer that burden from the head to the shoulders. The armorer's answer was an internal revolution, a hidden system of suspension. A sturdy leather strap was riveted inside the helmet, running from the front to the back like a headband. This strap was not tight against the skull. It was designed to hang just above the crown of the head. The entire helmet, in effect, was suspended from this inner belt, with its weight distributed evenly across the shoulders via the rigid gorget plates below. This created a small but crucial air gap between the steel skull and the wearer's head, a space that also helped to dissipate the heat and force of any blow. The knight inside this fortress was not carrying the weight on his head. He was wearing it on his shoulders, a subtle but profound distinction that made this advanced protection viable on the march and in the fight. This internal strap system transformed the very experience of wearing armor, proving that the most important innovations were often the ones you could never see. This humble padded garment holds the answer to one of the most practical riddles in the evolution of harness. The pourpoint was not worn beneath the mail, but strategically placed over it, a quilted jacket that became the anchor point for a knight's first experiments with solid plate. Before the sophisticated internal strapping of a full harness was conceived, armorers faced a fundamental problem. How do you securely attach heavy, rigid steel plates to a body that is already encased in a flexible, shifting layer of chainmail? Simply strapping a polen to a knee covered in mail would be useless. The whole assembly would slide down the leg with the first step. The pourpoint was the ingenious solution. It provided a stable, textile foundation. Its surface was punctuated with a series of carefully placed eyelets, small holes reinforced with stitching or metal rings. Through these holes passed the points, the sturdy leather laces that tied the early plate defenses directly to the pourpoint itself. The very name of the garment, from the Old French word meaning pricked or pierced, is a direct reference to this forest of functional holes. This system transformed the knight's silhouette. A rerebrace could be laced firmly to the padded sleeve over the upper arm, a pair of early greaves secured to the quilted legs. Each piece of plate was individually tied down, creating a composite defense that blended the flexibility of mail with the rigid protection of steel at the most vulnerable joints. This solves the archaeological mystery of why we see a sudden explosion of specialized plate pieces in the 14th century, yet no evidence of the complex harnesses needed to hold them. The missing link was not a metal bracket, but a tailored cloth jacket. The pourpoint was the prototype, the testing ground where the full suit of plate armor was first conceived, one carefully tied piece at a time. A knight's own safety depended entirely on the courage of the animal beneath him. The warhorse's bard was not an accessory. It was an extension of the knight's own harness, and its most critical piece was the chanfron, the armored mask for the horse's head. Crafting this piece was a delicate puzzle of life and death. How do you shield the brain, eyes, and major arteries of a 1,000-pound animal that must still see its path, hear its rider's commands, and breathe easily in the thick of battle? The solutions were brilliantly anatomical. The main plate curved over the horse's skull, often flaring out to protect the sensitive cheekbones. Eye guards were not solid caps, but were instead raised, cup-like bulges with narrow sighting holes, allowing the horse peripheral vision while deflecting arrows and sword tips. A central plate, the pole plate, shielded the vulnerable pole right between the ears. Yet these practical shapes were frequently transformed into something far more dramatic. Elaborate, sculpted steel ears were common, and some chanfrons were even fitted with spiraling metal horns, turning the warhorse into a mythical beast. The psychological impact is undeniable. A line of these armored creatures charging out of the dust would have been a terrifying sight, designed to spook enemy horses and unnerve the infantry they were about to trample. But these decorations may have served a more subtle, practical purpose. Those shaped ears could have functioned as reinforced deflectors for blows aimed at the crown of the head, while horns might have been used to parry incoming lance points in a cavalry clash. The silent testimony of surviving chanfrons, however, tells a more somber story. Many bear the scars of their service, deep gouges from poleaxes, and the distinctive, punched holes from crossbow bolts. These are not mere scratches. They are evidence of targeted, desperate attacks. An opponent knew that killing or disabling the horse was the fastest way to bring a knight down. Each repaired dent is a record of a close call, a moment where the armor did its job and the horse lived to fight another day. thanks to the skill of an armorer who could mend steel as well as make it. This evidence points to a bond that went far beyond mere utility. The care taken to protect and repair the chanfron speaks of a deep, necessary partnership between the knight and his steed, a recognition that in the chaos of combat, they were one creature, one fortress, whose survival was inextricably linked. A knight's shoulder could become a fortress in its own right. The pauldron of the 15th century grew into a massive, sculpted shell of steel, but its most telling feature was its lack of balance. For a right-handed knight, the left pauldron was often a sprawling defensive landscape, while the right remained comparatively sleek and compact. This was no aesthetic choice. It was a direct and brilliant answer to the geometry of combat. When a knight held his sword or lance, his body naturally turned, presenting his left shoulder as the leading edge to his opponent. This was the side most likely to absorb the full force of a lance strike in a tournament charge or a heavy sword blow in a melee. The solution was to turn that shoulder into a deflective bastion. These enormous left pauldrons were not just big, they were intelligently shaped. Their surfaces were masterpieces of curved steel, designed with a specific upward sweep. When a lance point struck, it did not meet a flat wall. Instead, the angled surface caught the tip and guided it upward, channeling its deadly energy up and over the wearer's head, harmlessly into the air. This was physics harnessed for survival, a calculated redirection of force that turned a killing blow into a glancing strike. But such a heavy piece of steel created an immediate problem of its own. How could a knight possibly fight with what amounted to a small shield permanently bolted to one shoulder? The answer lay in a hidden system of balance and articulation. The pauldron was not a single, rigid plate. It was constructed from multiple lames, overlapping steel strips that allowed the entire assembly to pivot and shift with the movement of the arm. Its weight was carefully distributed, anchored securely to the backplate and cuirass, so that it did not pull unbearably on the shoulder joint. A knight could still raise his arm to strike, and the pauldron would move with him, its defensive canopy remaining in place. The ultimate expression of this logic was the Grand Guard, a reinforcing plate that was sometimes integrated directly into the pauldron, extending its coverage across the left side of the breastplate. This created a single, seamless deflective surface from shoulder to chest, a unified shield for the entire side of the body that faced the enemy. This asymmetrical harness tells a silent story of countless combats analyzed and solved. It reveals that armorers were not just shaping steel, they were choreographing a deadly dance, anticipating every angle of attack and building a second skin that knew exactly which way the knight would turn. That stark, functional helmet was the face of a new kind of army. The gutter-shaped sallet presents a mystery of pure utility, a design stripped of all artistry to solve a single, massive problem. Its name tells you everything. It was not shaped like a beast or a noble's face, but like a common rainwater gutter, a simple, deep curve hammered from a single sheet of steel. Its vision slit was a mere slash in the metal, and it often lacked any complex pivoting visor. Why would this brutally simple helmet become the standard for thousands of Italian infantrymen and mercenaries when the beautiful, articulated close helmet existed just a short ride away in the same city? The answer is a story of economics, not aesthetics. The gutter sallet was the ultimate mass-produced solution. An armorer did not need to be a master metalsmith to create one. He could take a single plate of steel, heat it, and beat it into that distinctive trough shape over a simple form. There were no separate visors to hinge, no intricate cheek plates to fit. This process was fast, it used less material, and it required far less skilled labor. For the condottieri generals who paid for their armies out of their own pockets, this was a calculation of survival. A single close helmet could cost as much as a small farm, enough to equip an entire squad of infantry with reliable gutter sallets. This helmet did not promise invincibility, it promised sufficient protection. It would reliably turn a glancing sword blow and could often deflect a crossbow bolt that did not strike dead center. For the common soldier, that was enough. It was the difference between a crippling head wound and walking away from the fight. This represents a quiet revolution, the true democratization of armor. It solved the logistical puzzle of how to turn a levy of farmers and townsmen into a professional fighting force, without bankrupting the state or the mercenary captain who hired them. The gutter sallet is a testament to the idea that the most important harness design is not always the most advanced, but the one that protects the most people. Its widespread use tells us that by the late medieval period, the value of a single soldier's life, while still measured in coin, had a price that even a practical mercenary was willing to pay. A small, unassuming bracket on the breastplate holds the key to the most violent moment in a knight's life. The lance rest seems like a simple hook, a place to steady the heavy wooden lance before a charge. But its true purpose is a puzzle that goes far beyond mere support. The common belief is that it helped bear the weapon's weight, and it did, but this was only the beginning of its function. The real mystery lies in what happened at the instant of impact. When the lance struck an opponent's shield or breastplate at a full gallop, the force generated was enough to shatter the weapon and potentially throw the knight clean out of his saddle. How did this small piece of metal prevent that catastrophic outcome? It was not just a hook, it was a sophisticated shock absorber and a pivot point in one. The rest acted as the fulcrum for the entire weapon. As the knight leaned forward into the charge, the lance was wedged tightly between his body and the rest, creating a single, unified system of mass and momentum. At the moment of impact, the force did not travel up the lance and into the knight's arm. Instead, it was channeled directly through the rigid bracket and into the solid steel of the breastplate. From there, the energy was dissipated through the entire harness and finally into the massive war saddle, which was itself locked to the horse's back. The knight and his steed became one living, breathing counterweight, absorbing the brutal physics of the collision. This explains the curious design of many lance rests, which were hinged or even completely removable. Why go to such trouble for a simple hook? On foot, a rigid lance rest would be a dangerous liability. It could catch an opponent's weapon, snag on a surcoat, or simply get in the way of wielding a sword or axe. A knight who was unhorsed could quickly fold the rest flat against his breastplate or detach it entirely, transforming his harness from a specialized jousting tool back into a versatile battlefield defense. This small, intelligent bracket is therefore a key to understanding the medieval mind. It represents a perfect marriage of form and function, a piece of harness that was only deployed for the few, terrifying seconds of the cavalry charge. It proves that the knight's greatest strength was not just his armor, but his deep understanding of how to turn his own body into a single, unstoppable weapon. That flared wing on a knight's elbow was far more than a decorative flourish. The Counters fan solved a lethal puzzle that every warrior faced, the moment his arm bent in combat. When a knight raised his sword to strike, the simple act of bending his elbow created a dangerous gap in his defenses. The plates of his rerebrace and vambrace would separate, exposing the soft, inner joint. This was not merely a vulnerable spot, it was a direct channel to a major artery. An enemy's blade, whether a sword point or a spear tip, could slide up from below, bypassing all other armor to deliver a crippling or fatal wound. The fan was the brilliant, swinging answer to this threat. Its large, protruding shape hung down to cover this gap completely, regardless of the arm's position. A thrust aimed at that tender hollow would not find flesh, but would instead clang against the steel wing, its force harmlessly deflected outward. This was dynamic protection in its purest form, a moving shield that tracked the arm's every motion. The evolution of this fan tells a story of an escalating arms race. In early suits, the wing was a modest, functional extension, but as armorers refined their craft, the fan grew more pronounced. In the pinnacle of Gothic armor, these wings became massive, sculpted masterpieces, often deeply fluted to add strength and a terrifying beauty. This was not an indulgence in style, it was a calculated enhancement. A larger fan offered a wider defensive radius, catching attacks from more extreme angles. The fluting made the thin steel incredibly rigid, allowing it to be both large and light enough for a warrior to wield his weapon without hindrance. This continuous refinement represents the armorer's obsessive quest for a perfect balance, where maximum protection for a vital joint never came at the cost of the mobility that made the knight a lethal force. The silent, graceful arc of the Counters fan is a testament to a battle fought, and one not on the field, but on the drawing boards of forgotten geniuses, who understood that a knight's life could depend on the precise curve of a single piece of steel. A tiny, stamped lion on the inside of a breastplate is a signature from a master who lived 500 years ago. These armorer's marks are a secret language etched into the steel, a code that transforms a piece of harness from an anonymous artifact into a personal story. Deciphering this code is the work of modern-day detectives, and the clues they follow are these miniature symbols. They were far more than a matter of pride. They were a sophisticated system of quality control and commercial branding in a fiercely competitive market. Take the mysterious Gothic mark, a distinctive symbol used by the workshops of Nuremberg. This was not a random design. It was a collective trademark that guaranteed a certain standard of craftsmanship. When a knight saw that mark, he knew the armor came from a city renowned for its technical excellence and its iconic fluted style. It was a promise of protection backed by an entire guild's reputation. On the other side of Europe, Venetian armorers used a different kind of power, the Lion of St. Mark. This symbol was not just a workshop mark, it was a statement of civic pride and political authority. The Venetian Republic tightly controlled its arms industry, and the lion stamp was a formal seal of approval, certifying that the piece met the state's exacting standards and was a legitimate product of the Serene Republic. This was branding on a geopolitical scale. Other marks served more immediate, life-saving purposes. A proof mark, often a small pistol or cross, was a formal certificate that the steel had survived its violent test against a gunshot. But a maker's mark tells a different story, one of origin and artistry. Unraveling this language allows us to trace a suit's incredible journey. We can follow a harness stamped with a Milanese mark as it travels north over the Alps, sold to a German nobleman who then has local Augsburg craftsmen add personalized elements. The armor becomes a map of European trade routes and artistic cross-pollination. Its surface a collage of influences from different workshops and patrons. Each tiny stamp is a frozen moment in a vast, interconnected network of commerce and craft, a permanent whisper of the armorer's name and the long, forgotten road his creation traveled to reach its knight. A knight could rise from the ground without any help at all. The persistent image of a steel-clad warrior being winched onto his horse by a crane is a complete fiction, a romantic invention from much later centuries that has stubbornly refused to die. The truth is far more impressive. A complete suit of plate armor from the 15th century weighed between 55 and 60 pounds. This sounds significant until you consider how that weight was carried. It was not a single burden like a modern backpack, but a perfectly distributed load across the entire body, from the shoulders down to the sabatons on the feet. The weight was supported by the hips and legs, the strongest parts of the body, making it entirely possible for a fit individual to run, mount a horse, and even perform acrobatics. Historical fight manuals from masters like Fior de Liberi and Joachim Meyer are filled with astonishing illustrations that show the true capabilities of an armored man. These are not simple fighting stances. They depict knights performing forward rolls, climbing tall ladders using only their arms, and even executing nimble cartwheels, all while encased in their steel shells. These manuals were practical textbooks for survival, not works of fantasy. Their existence proves that mobility was not just possible, it was a fundamental requirement of combat. A knight who could not quickly regain his feet after being knocked down was a dead knight. How did such an absurd myth about immobility become our default belief? The answer lies in a modern disconnect from the physical world. We live in an age of machinery and sedentary life, where the idea of carrying such weight while performing complex maneuvers seems alien and impossible. Our perception of the medieval period became clouded by Victorian-era pageants and Hollywood films, where armor was often made of thick, inflexible props that were genuinely cumbersome to wear. We projected that modern clumsiness onto the past, forgetting the genius of the original designs. The real harness was a second skin, a masterpiece of ergonomics that enhanced the wearer's strength and protection without sacrificing the agility that kept him alive. This myth ultimately tells us more about ourselves than about the knights of old, revealing how easily we can underestimate the physical prowess and practical intelligence of a world we have left behind. That final, glorious defiance of the knightly age is etched in steel across the body of Emperor Maximilian I. His namesake armor from the early 16th century is a walking contradiction, a harness born at the very moment its purpose was being stolen by the crack of gunpowder. Its most striking feature is a surface covered from head to toe in delicate, parallel fluting. But this is not the sharp, angular fluting of the old Gothic style. These are rounded, full-bodied grooves that make the steel look as if it has been carefully corrugated. Why would armorers invest such insane levels of artistry into a defense that was becoming more vulnerable with each passing year? The answer is not found on the battlefield, but in the imperial court and on the tournament field. This armor was never meant to be a practical answer to the cannon. It was a loud, metallic proclamation of Habsburg power. Maximilian was a master of propaganda, and he understood that the image of the invincible knight, perfected and glorified, could bolster his authority in a changing world. The fluting was his signature, a style so distinctive that it became an instant status symbol for any noble who could afford it. But to dismiss it as mere pageantry is to miss its final, brilliant engineering. This particular fluting was not just for show. The rounded grooves added immense structural rigidity to the plates, allowing armorers to use slightly thinner, lighter steel without sacrificing strength. This was a crucial advantage in the exhausting, highly specialized world of the tournament. In the German joust, the Gestag, knights charged at each other with blunt lances, aiming to shatter them on their opponent's reinforced breastplate. The Maximilian fluting, optimized for this specific, brutal impact, helped distribute the shock across the entire torso, turning the knight into a single, resonant bell that could withstand repeated, concussive blows. This armor, therefore, represents the final, perfect solution to a puzzle that was already fading. It was the ultimate expression of personal, chivalric combat, refined to its absolute peak just as the modern age of impersonal, industrialized warfare was dawning. The Maximilian harness is a ghost of a future that never was, a beautiful, deeply intelligent answer to a question the world was about to stop asking. A knight's brilliant white steel was a beacon on the tournament field, but it was a liability on the long march. The true color of war was often a deep, matte black. This is the enigma of black and white armor, a finish that spoke a silent language of practicality and status. The process for creating black armor was not one of neglect, but of sophisticated chemistry. Armorers used a technique called bluing, carefully heating the steel in a bed of hot charcoal or treating it with special oils. This process created a thin, protective layer of magnetite, a black iron oxide, across the surface. This finish was not merely for show. It was a powerful shield against the red rust that could eat through a harness during a damp campaign. A blackened surface was also brilliantly non-reflective, eliminating the gleam that could betray a knight's position during a night watch or an ambush. For a man in a months-long campaign, this was the smartest choice, armor that required less constant polishing and offered a tactical advantage. But here lies the social puzzle. Was this practical black harness seen as inferior to its polished white counterpart? The answer is not simple. In the glittering world of the court, a mere bright finish was a clear statement of wealth. It declared that its owner had the time and the servants to maintain such a high standard, that he lived a life where mud and grime were not his constant companions. A white harness was parade armor, a symbol of prestige meant for display. Yet on the eve of a battle, that same nobleman would likely don a blued or even a painted harness. Surviving financial records from great lords show payments for both types, indicating a clear understanding of the right tool for the right occasion. The paint itself is a ghost in the archaeological record, as most organic coatings have long since flaked away. But we have hints of vibrant colors, deep blues and rich burgundies, applied not just for heraldry, but as another layer of sealant against the elements. This reveals a world where a knight's appearance was a flexible code. He could be the shining champion one day and the practical, shadowed warrior the next. The choice between black and white armor was never about good and bad, but about context. It forces us to see past the idealized tapestries to the reality of a man who knew that survival, not just spectacle, was the ultimate mark of a true knight. The story of plate armor ends not with a single shattering blow, but with a slow, quiet fading. We have followed 34 brilliant solutions to the puzzle of personal protection, yet the final design is the story of their obsolescence. The common answer is gunpowder, and the thunder of cannons certainly announced a new age. But the true reasons for armor's decline weave a more complex tapestry of economics, tactics, and a fundamental shift in the value of a single soldier's life. The rise of professional standing armies forever changed the equation. A king or a republic could now afford to field thousands of soldiers for years on end. The staggering cost of outfitting every man in a full harness was a logistical impossibility. It was far more efficient to spend that metal and money on more muskets, more pikes, and more gunpowder. The battlefield itself transformed into a terrifying new landscape dominated by the pike and shot formation. Why encase a man in 60 pounds of steel when his primary role was to stand in a block, fire a volley, and present a forest of 18-foot-long pikes against a cavalry charge? In this new world, mobility and massed firepower triumphed over individual resilience. Full plate armor, the pinnacle of personal defense, became a liability, slowing a soldier down and exhausting him on long marches to no clear advantage. This led to a process of selective abandonment, a quiet triage performed by armies across Europe. The leg harness, the greaves and polans that were so difficult to march in, were the first to go. Then the vambraces and pauldrons followed, their complex articulation no longer worth the cost and weight. Yet the core of the defense endured. The breastplate and the helmet, the cuirass and the morion, persisted for centuries. They protected the vital organs and the head from flying splinters, stray bullets, and the slashing swords that still decided the final melee. This gradual stripping away reveals the final, sobering truth. The ingenious solutions we have explored, from the deflecting curves of the Milanese breastplate to the locking mechanism of the armet, were answers to a world of combat that was swiftly passing. They were perfect for the age of the lance and the longsword, but they could not solve the new puzzle of massed, impersonal warfare. The knight in his shining harness did not fall to a better knight. He was made redundant by the economics of the musket and the organized power of the state. The story of Armor's End is a profound lesson in technological change. It shows us that even the most perfect solution is only temporary, a brilliant answer to a question that the world, inevitably, stops asking. And so we reach the end of our deep dive into 35 medieval harness designs and their many mysteries. From the skeletal framework of the Spangenhelm to the corrugated steel of Maximilian armor, we have witnessed how each piece was a brilliant answer to a deadly puzzle of warfare, status, and human ingenuity. These were not just shells of cold steel. They were conversations. They were a dialogue between the warrior who faced the lance and the armorer who understood the physics of its impact. Every fluted groove, every articulated lame, and every hidden leather strap speaks of a world where survival was an art form, and the body itself was a fortress to be perfected. The true legacy of this harness is not locked in museums, but in the questions it forces us to ask about the people who wore it. Were they anonymous metal giants, or individuals navigating a world of sacred objects and calculated risks? Which of these mysteries pulled you deepest into the past? The ritual killing of a Spangenhelm, or the secret identity of the Coppergate's owner? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this historical investigation, be sure to like, subscribe, and join us for our next journey into the past. Until then, keep questioning the world